So this is basically all. This is the reason why I want to tell this story. It's very simple and very basic, and that is why it has a particular significance as far as I'm concerned. The other thing, which I can maybe say in passing, which also is interesting with this story, is that you may have noticed that this king said to the Buddha-to-be that I'm going to go into war. I need a pair of wheels for going into war. And yet the Buddha actually makes these wheels for him. You might have thought that this Buddha-to-be would have said, well, sir, your majesty, you should be careful about this war business. It's not going to do any good. But he doesn't say that. He actually does his duty to the king. He does what the king requires that he does. That is interesting. And the point here, of course, is that, as always, karma is in the intention. And obviously the Buddha-to-be's intention was nothing to do with war. It was to provide the service to the king that the king required. That's interesting, just as a small aside of what's going on there. So that was the first life story of the Buddha I wanted to mention. The second one, which also shows a lot about who the Buddha-to-be was before his last birth. This is a much more fabulous, more legendary kind of story. It occurs in the suttas, but despite its legendary and mythological content, it's a powerful story, and I think it shows a lot about who the Buddha actually was. And this is a story, again, where the Buddha, in this time, he was a king, a very, very powerful king, ruling over a vast, enormous country, extremely wealthy. Essentially, he had everything that any human being ever can desire to have. Lots of palaces, lots of all kind of sensual pleasures that you could possibly desire. He had absolutely everything. If you think about maybe the richest people alive today, people like Bill Gates or whatever, they were like pocket money what they have compared to what this king had. That was pretty much where how wealthy he was. And not only was he wealthy, but obviously he was the king, so he was also supremely powerful. He had full authority over the kingdom that he ruled. So he also had this other thing that people in the world seek for power, seek for being in a position where we can influence things around us. So he had money, absolute wealth, absolute pleasure, and also pretty much absolute power, being the king. On top of that, he was beloved by the people in the country. It says in this sutta that whenever he went out, the people in the country would come out in the streets to greet him and to meet him, and they would look upon him as a father. So they would see him as somebody who protected them, who helped them out if they had problems. So somebody who was very popular with the people around him. And in return, he would look at the people in his country as his children, again, to protect them, to help them, to do his best, to make sure he served them properly. So he was powerful, he was popular, he was wealthy, he had great fame. He had everything that anybody can expect to have in this world. He had the absolute maximum of these things. But of course, the interesting thing is that despite having the absolute maximum you can have of worldly happiness or worldly pleasures, of all these things that people are generally aspiring for in the world, despite that, after having ruled for a long period of time, he decided to give it all up.